Namaste friends. Today we will be talking about the different components of an automobile. And I may remind you here again that when we are talking about automobiles, precisely we are talking about cars. Well, perhaps you can understand that an automobile may have a large number of components. So what we do is that we divide them into four basic parts. So we can say that we have four basic components in an automobile. Apart from these four basic components, we have suspension system and two control mechanisms. They are steering system and brakes. So first we start with the four basic components of an automobile. First of all, we have the chassis. Now the chassis of the automobile is a bit which you won't find in modern cars today. To understand it better, I would like to give you the example of a commercial heavy vehicle. Maybe while moving on the roads, you have noticed some heavy vehicles being transported to the dealers. You will find that driver is driving them on the road, but he has no cover on his head and it is all open. You may notice a heavy frame on which we find that we have axles and wheels, then we have engine mounted, steering system mounted, everything is there except the body of the vehicle. And it is a very common practice that when you buy a commercial vehicle, you get that chassis only, and after that you have to go to a person who is manufacturing the bodies of the vehicle, and then you can get your body made, whether it is a truck or a bus. So the example is good to understand what the chassis is. So it is in the form of a frame which seems to be very strong, and then it has got all the components attached to it minus body. This type of chassis was used in old cars also. But today, with the advancement in welding technology, we have something different as far as modern cars are concerned. We call it unit construction. And you can imagine that it is a car body. It is also known as shell. So this body or the shell, you will find it has got a structure on which we can fix different components of the automobile, be it an engine, be it transmission system, be it steering system, axles, wheels and everything. Broadly, it is in the form of shape of automobile. Different components can be placed inside it. To improve the things, we have subframes. Now these subframes carry engine or transmission system, and these are fixed on the main unit. So the first basic component is chassis, and in modern cars you find it in the form of unit construction, which is in the shape of a body or shell. The second basic component of an automobile is an engine. It is an internal combustion engine, and in case of automobiles, it is a 4-stroke engine, and also it has to be a multi-cylinder engine. The fact is that we cannot use or we do not use single cylinder engine. The reason being the power required to run the automobile may be significant. A single cylinder engine of course can produce any amount of power to run the vehicle, but to produce more power you have to give more fuel as input, you have to have high pressures inside the cylinder, All these cause the heavier engine, which is not proper. So instead of this, we have multi-cylinder engine. Each cylinder is providing particular amount of power, and combining it together, we get enough power to run the automobile. So in case of automobiles, we are almost invariably using a multi-cylinder engine, and it has to be a 4-stroke engine. Now, IC engine in automobiles have been modified, seeing the requirement of emission so that they emit minimum possible harmful gases. That is one thing. Second thing is that they have been modified so that we get a better fuel economy from the vehicle. So we have these changes which have come place in the internal combustion engines, and we will talk in details about these changes when we discuss about the internal combustion engines separately. The third component, or basic component as we are saying, of the automobile is transmission system. Well, transmission system has got so many sub-components. The purpose of transmission system is to transfer motion which is available at the engine shaft or crankshaft of the engine to the road wheels ultimately. So this causes the rotation of road wheels, and because they are in frictional contact with the road surface, it is possible for the vehicle to move on the road surface. Now, as I've told you, there are several subcomponents in transmission system. First of all, we have clutch. Now, clutch is a component which allows the motion to be transferred at the will of the driver. That is one thing. Secondly, it allows the gradual transmission of motion from crankshaft to the road wheels. So we have clutch, which is the first component of transmission system. We will talk about clutch in details later when we come to it. Next is gearbox. Now gearbox is another very important part of the transmission system. You are familiar with the gears. We have pair of gear. One is mounted on the driving shaft, another is mounted on the driven shaft. So we can transfer motion from driving shaft to the driven shaft, but it is transferred in the ratio, and that ratio depends upon the diameters of the gears. This also you have studied in details in your gears in some other course. Now the fact is that gearbox has got different pairs of gears. So the motion from the engine after the clutch is transferred to the next component of transmission system, that is propeller shaft, in different ratios. So the speed of the driving shaft and speed of the driven shaft, and here we have driving shaft in the form of input shaft to the gearbox, and driven shaft is in the form of output shaft of the gearbox in different ratios. And we will see later when we talk about gearbox in details that how it helps us to achieve different amount of torque which is needed for different driving conditions. Then we have propeller shaft. Now this can be considered, or this can be said to be the most significant component of transmission system. In any vehicle, particularly heavy vehicles, you can very well notice it. It is a very long shaft. Generally, engine is mounted in the front part of the vehicle, and this shaft transfers motion from gearbox, which is again in the front part of the vehicle, to the axle, which is known as live axle, and to which the wheels are connected. So this is quite significant component, and this can be very conveniently observed, particularly in case of heavy vehicles. Now, propeller shaft simply transfers motion from output shaft of the gearbox to the rear axle. We are saying rear axle, but the fact is that it can transfer motion to the front axle also. When the motion is being transferred to the rear axle, it is known as rear wheel drive. But when the motion is transferred to the front axle, it is known as front wheel drive. Now there is another variant, or there is another possibility that motion is transferred to both front as well as rear axle. So these type of vehicles are known as four-wheel drives.